Everyone, thanks so much for joining us for our Industry Innovators webinar. My name is Rebecca Fleming and I'm an HR consultant with the HR Advantage. Today we're going to be talking about documenting safety meetings, which often take the form of verbal toolbox talks. If that's a new term for you, it's one of the many different methods of communicating safety information in the workplace. We all know that sharing information, particularly safety information, is important. And so if toolbox talks are a method of sharing information, is it enough, or do you actually need to take it a step further and document those meetings? We'll get into that in a moment, but first I'd like to introduce you to the HR Advantage if you haven't had the opportunity to work with us yet. Here at the HR Advantage, we're a dedicated HR management partner for small to medium-sized businesses. We provide outsourced HR, health and safety, payroll, marketing, compliance, and general operational support so owners and leaders can focus on growing their businesses. We are a team of specialists who get to know your business like it's our own. So whether that's recruiting, navigating employment or safety legislation, processing payroll, or building a better workplace culture, we offer hands-on support that's both strategic and professional. My favorite part about working at the HR Advantage is just that. We're experts in our field, and that gives you the freedom and opportunity to focus on what you are an expert in. We're really existing to take the weight of HR and compliance off your plate by being proactive, responsive, and rooted in solutions. Now, we mentioned toolbox talks, so we're going to review those in a little bit more detail, talk about why they matter, what you're legally required to do, because under Alberta occupational health and legislation, employers do have a legal requirement to inform workers about hazards in the workplace. We're also going to follow up with some tips for implementing this in your workplace. Now, we'll do a quick overview of the legislative requirements. Now, this is tailored to Alberta, but all provinces have similar occupational health and safety legislation. There are some differences interprovincially, but for the purposes of this presentation here, we're going to just touch on the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Act, which talks about the fact that employers must ensure workers are aware of hazards, must ensure that workers are competent to perform their work safely, and that employers must actively involve workers in hazard assessments and communicating the results. So when they're done right and they're documented, toolbox talks are a practical way to demonstrate that you're meeting these obligations. Now, even if it's not legislated how often they have to occur, proving that they did occur and proving the communication is the crucial part here. Now, toolbox talks are an easy way to communicate and keep safety at the forefront of your work. They are short, focused safety discussions on a specific hazard, task, or a policy. So usually between 5 to 15-minute meetings, typically at the start of a shift or a task. The frequency should be relevant to your business. So whether it's daily, weekly, tied to specific tasks, whether it's the introduction of new equipment or processes, that sort of thing. The frequency should really reflect the risk level of your operation, and you should tailor them to your workplace. So if you have something that's a lower risk environment, you might only need one touch base at the beginning of the workday or perhaps once per week versus an environment that's a lot more high risk. Might wish to have discussions at the beginning of shift change or when switching tasks from one thing to another. They can really be formal or informal, but they should have a purpose and they should have a record because, as I mentioned, proving the communication is key. These talks will really help to enforce safety awareness and support a proactive safety culture, but it's not the only thing that you should be doing and documenting regarding safety. So you might have heard an HR or a health and safety professional say, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And there's a reason that we have this saying, not only because you as an employer need to prove that you're meeting your legal requirements under Alberta occupational health and legislation, but it's really critical to protect you as a business owner during inspections, if there's any incidences, and during investigations. So acknowledging that, we recommend that safety meetings have a written element to them. So toolbox talks, regardless of the name being talk, can definitely be part of the equation in communicating with your team about safety, but there should still be a written element to them and to any other safety communications or meetings that you might have. So some employers document their toolbox talks by getting signatures from those who attended. Some like to do it more informally and then document your regular monthly safety meetings. Both of those things work and should really be tailored to what your business needs and what the specific risk level is of your environment. So let's talk about some tips. Whether you call them toolbox talks or whether you just have a regular safety meeting, it's important you follow the talk, document, and acknowledge pathway. So we recommend that you structure your conversations by starting out with a date, time, location, and an attendance sign-off sheet. So you can pass around an attendance sheet during the conversation. You can have one at the door that people sign on their way in or their way out. Either thing works. Now, in terms of any content, we recommend that you kind of check off a few common things. So, acknowledge any new hires, acknowledge any subcontractors on site. If there's any personnel changes, for example, a promotion to a supervisor, or somebody has switched roles and they're no longer working on site, just a quick pulse check about the personnel side of things. Then we recommend going into any incidences or training updates. So perhaps you have an incident that had occurred and you now have some corrective actions to share. That would be excellent to review. And as well as any training updates, if somebody recently did first aid or recently did fall protection training, or a reminder about any upcoming training is really important. And then touching back on the legislative requirements for talking about hazards. So you want to take some dedicated time within your safety meeting or your toolbox talk to review any specific hazards. So whether that's job specific hazards or whether it's a formal hazard assessment, you can pass around copies of relevant formal hazard assessments for the task that you're working on. If there's a new FHA for an equipment or a process or something like that, that everybody needs to review, the safety meetings and toolbox talks are a great opportunity to get acknowledgement and signature on those documents. We also recommend that you do a little bit of a touch base on just some general compliance things. So for example, is everybody aware of where they can find the health and safety manual? Does everybody know what the emergency response procedures are for the particular site that you're working on? And this is really going to be dependent on what kind of risk level and environment you're working in. But take a moment to review some of those things because it can really help identify what training you might need, if somebody needs to have a little bit of a refresher, if you have some gaps in your onboarding process. That's going to be really important and a really helpful outcome of these safety meetings. So again, going back to the talk, document, and acknowledge path, regardless of how you do your toolbox talks or your safety meetings, make sure you have a talk about it, you document it, and then have staff acknowledge that they heard the talk and that it was documented, and they've acknowledged the talk as well. So now a quick moment to touch about what HR Advantage provides our clients in terms of health and safety services. So this is really meant to just be a very high level, kind of easily digestible touch point regarding safety meetings and toolbox talks, but we really help our clients with building practical safety communication systems and tailored health and safety programs to your business. So we have a lot of experience with core and C Corp compliance, and we're really here to take the guesswork out of safety because it is too important to guess on what you need to do as an employer. So here's a general sample of what we would recommend that employers use for monthly safety meetings or toolbox talks. It can really be adapted for either. As we mentioned, make sure that you capture the meeting date and time and location. Recommend that you do a quick overview kind of on the personnel side of things, a little pulse check of where we're at as an organization. So review if there were any incidences or near misses or damages, might want to go over any sort of corrective actions at that point as well. Also recommend doing a little pulse check on the personnel side of things. So are there any new staff members present today? Are there any new hires? How many total people do we have on site? Any subcontractors? That sort of thing. Then moving on to training updates. So go over if there's anything upcoming for training, if there's anything that needs to be refreshed, or anybody who recently completed training, it's a great opportunity to call that out. And then kind of the crux of what we've been talking about is just making sure that hazards are communicated with your staff. So that can look like passing around the formal hazard assessments, whether they're new or whether they're kind of being represented for tasks at hand, whichever one fits the scenario and fits the risk level for your work is appropriate, but make sure that you do touch on formal hazard assessments at some point during your safety meeting. Now, also, this compliance checklist is going to look a bit different for everybody, but it's a great opportunity to go through a couple quick things. Talk about what you might need to work on in terms of training. So, for example, if you say, hey, does everyone know where the fire extinguisher is? And nobody knows, that's a gap that you need to identify. And that's something that was going to put you kind of in the non-compliance bucket, for lack of a better word. So also a great opportunity to touch base and make sure everybody knows about safety documentation and all of that information, first aid kits, emergency response procedures, that sort of thing. That's going to look different for everybody, but it's a great opportunity to do a checkpoint on that during every meeting or every toolbox talk to keep it in everybody's mind. Also recommend that you move on to a discussion. So this can be any updates from leadership saying, hey, you know what, we need to discuss XYZ. We need to talk specifically about the task that we're doing today. And then if employees have any sort of questions, so somebody might say, you know what, we actually need to get the blade sharpened on this saw, or we need to get the excavator serviced because it's making a funny noise. Those things should all be documented, and then make sure that you follow up on it. So whether or not a manager is attending this meeting, where it's just kind of kept at the supervisory level, we recommend that this document gets passed on to the next level of leadership so that they can review it, take any actions that are discussed, and keep it on file and file it properly so it can be referenced in the future. The second and third page to the meeting document. So this is where we kind of touch on our standard toolbox talk, for lack of a better word. So this is an opportunity to go through a little bit more of a narrative discussion about something that's topical to your work site. So this example here is about storm safety at work. And it's important that whatever you're going to be talking about kind of on a safety topic is relevant to your workplace. So for example, we talk a little bit about safety and emergency response procedures during storms here. It's important that you reference specifically to your work environment. Where can they find the emergency response procedures? Where is the muster point at the particular site that you're working at? So make it relevant, make it topical. It might not be relevant for a manufacturing environment to talk about sitting for long periods of time, but it might be important to talk about forklift safety or manual handling or prevention of repetitive strain injuries, that sort of thing. There's lots of information out there that you can adapt. We're also happy to help. We do this kind of thing on a regular basis for our clients as well. So it takes the guesswork out of it and everybody can be prepared to have a functional meeting. Now over here, just a sample of an attendance form that you could send across the room as you're talking. You can put at the entrance or the exit of your meeting site. But again, really important to document and have individuals who are present acknowledge that they were present. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. Admittedly, these are meant to be short, digestible nuggets of information within our Industry Innovators webinar series. If you have any follow-up questions about how we can support your business, please reach out to us. Our website is listed here. Same with our email at hello@hradvantageservices.com. We are always happy to help and support local businesses with their health and safety or human resources needs.